Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. It is such an honor to be the one to welcome you all today to this panel on youth vision and the democratic imagination. My name is Durant, and I'm an emerging poet and performance artist and an upcoming attorney. I just found out that I passed my bar last week. And today, I also have the privilege of moderating this panel and introducing our esteemed panelists. Speaking today, we have Mr. Lee Gelernt, who is a leading lawyer at the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and Deputy Director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. We have Ms. Yara Shahidi, who is an incredible actress and producer and co-founder of Seven Sun Productions. We have Mr. John Legend, who is a renowned artist and activist and founder of Human Level. And we have Dr. Salamishah Tillet, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and co-founder of A Long Walk Home. Thank you. So to get into our first question, I'm sure that we all recognize that art is among one of the first things we experience in our childhoods as we begin to communicate and understand ourselves and our roles in our communities and in society. In this way, art is often our first vehicle for grappling with concepts of justice and of democracy. And so in that vein, I'd like to begin today's panel by asking you if you could share with us a bit about the origins of the connective tissue you each developed as children that introduced your connection between justice and artistic expression. And how was your understanding of that connection strengthened or shifted over time? How are you seeing it inform younger generations today? And then separately for Mr. Gelernt, though as I understand it, you are not an artist by trade.
I'm the outlier.
Though I understand you're not an artist by trade, given your intense work with young people as a public interest attorney, could you also share a bit with us about how you see artists contributing to the work that you do? Anyone?
Would you like to start?
You can start anywhere, maybe
I'll go,
Dr. Tillet.
and then we'll end with the outlier. Just want to thank Sarah Lewis, who I've known for a very long time, since she was an undergrad at Harvard, Sherrilyn for inviting all of us. And I'm just really excited to be with one of my oldest and dearest friends who I know from college, John Stevens. Excited to be here. I'll go quickly. So I had the good fortune of growing up with a mother who is an artist, and she attended Arts High in Newark, and it's the first arts high school in the country. We grew up in a working class environment in Boston, but I never thought that there was any kind of distinction between high art and popular culture. And then my father's from Trinidad, and so if anyone is from Trinidad or is familiar with Trinidad, it's a country that's kind of centered around a massive cultural festival called Carnival that was created by enslaved people in resistance to their oppression. So art was like intrinsic to how I understood the world and lived in the world. And then just in terms of my formative years, growing up in Boston, in Dorchester, around the corner from us was the Elma Lewis School of Performing Arts. Elma Lewis is the first Black woman to receive a MacArthur Genius Award, and she created this cultural or the community center with such rigorous standards for the community. And she did work in prisons as well as I said, in the community. And so as a young person, I was the first live Christ child in the Black Nativity performance done by my claim to fame, Langston Hughes's famous musical. So I think, and then also, just if you're from Boston, you just have a lot of access to the Museum of Fine Arts, and it's free, and you can take classes there. So again, this idea that, all of these different disciplines were open to me and intrinsic to me is how I grew up, and also kind of shaped my worldview as a writer and as a critic, and then my sister's a photographer. So we never thought, even as you grew up working class, that being an artist was something that you shouldn't do. It's just the way that, it's like air or water. It's just something that is important to how we live in the world, but also how we believe the world should be. And then I get to raise artist children, so that's where I am now. So I'll pass it on to you.
Well, music has always been very central to my life, and the foundation of my musical understanding and experience was the Black church. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and my family basically ran the church. My grandfather was a pastor, and my grandmother was the church organist, my mother directed the choir. And so my experience of music was my family and the Black church. And we spent a lot of time making music together. We spent a lot of time fellowshipping together, and so much of the community that I built as a kid was just with other people who love to create music together. And the role of the Black church, especially when it came to fighting for justice, was a huge part of my understanding of like who I was, what I came from, and the legacy that I was supposed to carry. And so when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Dr. King. I was obsessed with like people who fought for my people to be free. And I even was in an essay competition when I was 15 years old. And it was for Black History Month, and the question was, how do you plan to make Black history? And I said, I'm going to become a successful recording artist, and I'm going to use my position to fight for my people. And then I would look and see the artists that I looked up to, like Stevie Wonder, or Harry Belafonte, or Aretha Franklin, or Mahalia Jackson, and a lot of them rooted in the Black church, a lot of them befriending and funding and fighting with and for people like Dr. King, you know, bailing him out of jail, paying for his plane so he could get from one place to another, paying to help support the protests. All these artists were doing that. And so I've always believed that part of being an artist was taking on the work of fighting for justice. And, you know, Nina Simone always said that our job is to reflect the times that we live in. Harry Belafonte always said that our job is to tell the truth. And I believe that our job is to help galvanize and inspire movements to help us see each other's humanity and help convene us so that we come together and fight together for what's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, I'd have to say, even though I've been in film and television for most of my life, I was a part of a household where we watched TV for like an hour on Saturdays max. The first time I watched TV during the week was because Blackish was on during Wednesday, like on Wednesdays. But what was done is, I think, the choice that my mother, Carrie Shahidi, made very early was that I'd be surrounded by a real alternate curricula. So every book that I read was either the stories of my cultures and people or stories from our global community. And they really honored my level of curiosity. So when I was reading and being like, oh, I want to read this religious book, and I got it the next day. And even the media that I'd consume of thinking about cartoons, Time Warp Trio, there's all sorts of cartoons where even though there was a dearth of diversity on television, generally speaking, there was such a like kind of hand selection of the media that was doing that work of not just telling our stories, but also normalizing seeing people of all cultures and backgrounds in a whole multitude of genres. So it wasn't just about our history, it was about these kids time traveling. It was about this, it was about that. And so that was a really helpful entry point, because I think when I then entered media in a more formal way, I had such a robust reference point for what the power of media could be, because I grew up feeling like I could be and do everything, as evidenced by what I was seeing and witnessing. When I realized that that really wasn't the status quo, it gave, I think, a real proper anchoring for me of, well, if I'm going to participate in media, how can I help move towards what I was given and the kind of continuous gift that that has been. And then I'd have to say the other kind of anchoring point for me was really reading Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin at 13. That was such a beautiful moment. It happened to be in my curricula at the all-girls Catholic school I was at. And I remember the kind of back-to-back moments of reading this short story, which also has a lot to do with movies. He's sitting here talking about movies and talking about how the movies present a darkness to people that can't see themselves in it. And then the very next day, I remember seeing a Buford Delaney portrait of Baldwin. And that's really what sent me down the rabbit hole of realizing, like you're saying, there's so much connective tissue, and that the beauty of artistry is like you find one artist, you find a whole world.
Oh, I love that. Thank you all so much. And then for Mr. Gelernt, could you also speak to us a little bit about how you've seen artists shaping the work that you do as an attorney?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you for having me. For me, this is an essential forum. I think any civil rights lawyer will tell you that there's only so much we can achieve through the courts, only so much systemic, lasting change through the courts, and that it needs a wider, much wider attack, and that means going outside of our comfort zone of the courts, outside of just talking back and forth between lawyers. And what I have found over my career is that artists are absolutely essential, and I think it's incumbent upon us to be getting out there and engaging with artists. Artists have a day job, and so they can't be following every single I mean, with the present company excluded, who are, you know, I can't thank John enough for how much he's done for the ACLU. But, you know, it takes hard work to get people engaged. And what I see artists doing, I think, are sort of four things. The first is amplifying issues, right? They have a much wider audience and a much bigger audience than we have. The other part of that is, second part is, they reach a different audience. And so it may not be that they reach people who are just never gonna come around, but they reach people who just may not be looking at these issues, engaged in these issues, particularly young people. And if John sends something out, then maybe the young person looks, whereas if we send something out, maybe they're just, you know, scrolling past it. The third thing I think is just specific to humor and satire. It really helps to point up the absurdity of some of the stuff that's going on, and we have found that people doing that has been really helpful. But the last thing I wanted to say, and for me the most important thing, is what artists can do better than anybody is humanize the people who are subjected to various policies. You know, we try as lawyers to do it, and it's absolutely essential, but we're just ultimately never going to be as good as artists across the board, humanizing people. And what I have found is that unless we can humanize the people who are subjected to policies, particularly now, and, you know, going back to Trump 1, we're never going to move anybody. We ultimately, I can talk about the rule of law and abstract principles all I want on TV, but people are going to sort of their eyes are going to glaze over. But if you get through to them on a human level, it works. I mean, I remember during Trump 1, you probably all remember that he was taking little babies away from their parents, well, the family separation policy. Ultimately took 6,000 little children away from their parents, some as young as 6 months. And I remember going into a TV station to do something about a different issue, but I said, you know, we just filed this lawsuit. The Trump administration is taking children away from their parents. And it just sort of didn't register. But when we finally got stories out there, and when we were able to tell stories about a mother with an 18-month-old child, they forced the mother to strap the child into the back seat of the car. The baby is wailing. They wouldn't let the mother comfort the child. The car pulls away, and she can see his little neck craning to get one last glimpse of his mother. Another child had glasses, 4 years old, modest means. Parents were obviously of modest means, but were able to scrape together the money to get a pair of glasses cases. When they came to take the little boy away, he's screaming, "Please don't take me." They take him away. Fortunately, he's wearing his glasses, but they don't let the mother get the glasses case. So all day long, all the mother's thinking about is, can my little boy see? Will they show him where he can put his glasses so they don't break? Another father asked, can I just have 60 seconds to brace my 7-year-old boy for what's going to happen? No, they didn't give him the time. The little boy is holding onto the father's leg while they're dragging him away. And so we ultimately were able to tell those stories to artists, and they amplified it in even a more powerful way and began reading the stories of the families, thinking of other ways to humanize. But I think if we cannot do a better job of humanizing the people, and we just allow the government to put out the sort of broad and, I'm just going to say factually inaccurate things that are going on, then I don't think we're ever going to get through. If it just remains sort of these abstract policies and there's no sense of who is being hurt by these policies, then we're not going to get there. And I don't think we can do that as lawyers by ourselves. And so I think artists play an absolutely essential role to doing that.
I think that was really beautifully said, and as somebody who's entering the legal field myself and is an artist also throughout my entire life, a lot of what you guys mentioned resonated with me as well, right? Like I grew up in my church, I grew up singing in my church, I grew up doing poetry within my community, and I think to your point, Mr. Gelernt, it's really important to make sure that the folks around us, that we're not losing sight of our fellow person and the communities that we're in as we go into any sphere that we go into. So I really appreciate you sharing that and sort of tying that that question together for us. I also think it's really beautiful how young you all spoke about finding that connective tissue within your lives. I know that the question was asking sort of about how you found it in your childhood, but I think it's beautiful that you did find it so early on in your childhood, many of you. The next question that I wanted to ask is about sort of the balancing of being a professional artist and then also being an advocate and remaining true to your passion for advocacy, right? So we know that artistic practices are by their nature imaginative, but they're also undergirded by pragmatic considerations. Artists need to make a living and want their art experienced and seen and heard. And so success in the arts can often mean sort of increased media attention, more eyes on you. So as an artist, particularly when it's core to your profession, artistry, how do you balance the desires to be authentic and forthcoming about your advocacy with the potentially professional constraints on that might curb those desires? And how do you not only navigate those challenges, but what would you suggest would be the integrated pathways for young rising artists to be able to navigate those challenges as well?
Well, I'll say that a lot of it is about being intentional and making choices ahead of time, plans ahead of time to focus on the things you care about, to hire and bring on people that will help you. We have a whole team that focuses on my philanthropic work and political work. They exist kind of separately from my music team, but they also are very communicative with my music team, and there's a lot of collaboration that goes on with them, and everyone on my music team knows that this is important to me and that it's a priority for me, and so I set that intention myself, and then everybody on my team knows that is how we operate, and so I think it's about making those intentional choices to prioritize and put your money where your mouth is, hiring people, setting aside time, setting aside moments when you're going to focus on these things. And it's tricky because, I'm still quite a mainstream artist, and I'm on The Voice and in a lot of very kind of mainstream, broad general audience spheres. And then I politically will say things that may be, alienating to some of those people that may love me on The Voice. But I do believe that part of being an artist and being a good communicator is making even art ideas that may kind of abstractly seem radical, make them feel approachable and human and rooted in love and humanity and connection. Like Lee was saying, that's a big part of what artists are supposed to be able to do. And so I've prided myself on finding a way to exist in this big mainstream space, but also say some things that may be controversial, but frame it in a way that feels like it shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't be radical.
Right.
I think hate is radical. I think discrimination is radical. I think mass incarceration is radical. And so I want people to think decarcerating
Right.
is just obvious and not radical. And so that's a lot of the way I think about what my role is as a communicator, is how do I make the alternative, the bad things we're seeing radical, and what we're advocating for, and the vision we see for the country and for the world seem like, of course, we should be doing that.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
I'll jump in.
Yeah,
I think for a long time, and for a lot of people, I have a big identity as a feminist activist. Along Home is an organization that uses art to empower young people to end violence against girls and women. So, and we invest in Black girls in Chicago and throughout the world to use their voices to advocate for justice for their communities, for the city, for the country. So there's that part of me, and I'm a sexual assault survivor, so it comes from this really homegrown experience with violence and wanting to eradicate that around the world. So there's the activist, Salamishah, and then there's the critic at the New York Times, and we can't protest. We can't advocate for political candidates, and you can't post things that are seen as particularly controversial or compromise your objectivity. Right. So for most of my life, I was an activist. I protested. I used my voice, coming of age, protesting, whether it was Supreme Court dismantling affirmative action, or the invasion of Iraq, or Black Lives Matter. I mean, that's the DNA of me. And now I'm in a position where what was my prominent identity has to kind of shift a bit. And what I think of as activism has to take another form. So it's similar, it's supposed to being on The Voice, but then also trying to figure out the ways of amplifying your politics. And I think as a critic, and I've had the good fortune of writing about many people in this room, I believe that my responsibility is to both highlight, I think I write a lot about Black artists. I think across different mediums. I think Black artists deserve a kind of rigor. They deserve being put into a historical context. And I think they deserve to have their work taken seriously, but with joy and play, right? And so that's kind of how I approach every person that I interview or every person that I write about. With the rigor of the training I've had, but also worthy of the work that they're doing. And I think that is a political act. Yeah. And I think the artists sometimes, I get a lot of feedback, and people don't feel like their work's taken seriously. They feel like people don't come to their work with the historical context, with the right questions. And so for me, it's really grappling with that and trying to do that honestly. And then I've been working on this book forever. So I've written other books on Alice Walker's The Color Purple. I've written a big book on slavery and how we remember it. And I've been working on this book for 20 years on Nina Simone. And so if you, it has taken its time. And if you're in the world of Nina Simone, you cannot disaggregate, or you cannot uncouple political activism and artistic brilliance, right? And so for me, it's just having her kind of seep into my soul, and all the work that I do, I think is profoundly political, but also you're both speaking in the moment that you're in, and then speaking for the future. And we heard about this in the last panel, but that when you're writing about Black artists who are very political, who put their lives and their voices on the line, you're engaging in a prophetic tradition, right? They're out of time and they're ahead of time. And part of my work is remembering them for the moment that we're in, but also trying to preserve them for the future. So it's just a lot of different hats, like the activist, the critic, the creator, creative writer. But yeah, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I do think it's sometimes weird to say that criticism is activism, but I really feel like I'm trying to do good work and the Lord's work and justice work through engaging Black artists in this moment, because they're the truth tellers and they're telling us what's wrong. And this is where the law and the artist, I think, kind of come together. The artist has already anticipated the problem and already answered it. We just don't always pay attention to them, or we refuse to, or we silence them. So that's for us to catch up with where they are and they're saving us already. So anyway, that's
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank
Anyway.
you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. Good talk. And then Yara, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, being 25, I think I've witnessed a few phases of what social activism looks like in the art world. Obviously, I think art comes from, as you guys have said, a deep activist tradition, especially Black art. And growing up and witnessing really how Blackish interplayed with the social moment, I think the moment we're living in right now is quite unique for this generation of artist activists, in that there was, in full transparency, a sense of clout for institutions being socially progressive. And we'd gone through some years in which alignment with social issues was actually a form of inviting in your audience, inviting in your consumer, being on the cutting edge of these conversations. And then quickly, the stakes got higher and there was no longer that alignment as we start to threaten the very infrastructure itself. It's cute when they can help control what the conversation is and help invite people into their version of what social activism looks like, what progressive thought looks like. But as soon as I think we really departed from that in a way that has threatened these infrastructures, we're now seeing things that are more similar to, I wouldn't equate it directly, but more similar to the civil rights movement in the sense of stakes, in that even as someone growing up on Blackish, I was very aware that the room that we had to play in was very much because somebody else had to experience the stakes decades prior. The Harry Belafontes had to experience the actual stakes of, this is a career-ending, potentially life-ending decision to be in an interracial couple on TV, or to be next to Dr. King at the March on Washington. These are choices that they're making that come with deep threats and CIA files on them and all sorts of things. And so witnessing right now this very particular moment in which many people, myself included, are struggling to figure out how do you remain authentic in a time in which we are now once again seeing people lose their jobs for saying, oh, I think this group of people are human beings that deserve safety. We're now seeing, and now that there isn't that same sense of clout in the alignment, we're seeing the abandonment of these issues and people by all sorts of places. And so I say this to not say that I have an answer, but to say that we're going through a different time that requires deep conversations about the many channels we'll be using as artists. Obviously, the storytelling will remain integral in helping culture, priming culture for the political change that needs to happen. But the reality of the way in which it was cute on magazine covers 10 years ago to be like, she believes women are humans. Read more here. That doesn't exist in the same way. And so it has been forums like these and deep conversations to say, it's now a question of potency. Like, where can I be most potent? And at times I remember hearing, I think it was you speak about the idea of infiltrating and educating. And so what had been shared there has really been the anchoring perspective that we've carried, not only as a family, but as a team. When I think of my mother and I carry Shahidi as business partners, the question is always, where could we be most potent? Is the goal at this moment to stay inside and invite people in? Is the goal at this moment to call out? Is the moment, and so it's a quite dynamic conversation in a way that I have to say I didn't even experience prior, even as someone that's been vocal my whole career. And I continue to invite other people's ideas and answers as to how we do it, because there really has been an unmooring for many artists to say, we're seeing people lose their jobs left and right. We're seeing people lose their access to livelihood.
I think that's all happening, and I think part of it now, I think, is it's going to be cool to be a rebellious artist, you know.
It's gonna be cool, but can you pay the rent?
I think we gotta ride a backlash to the backlash, and I feel like Trump and these guys have overplayed their hand, and them trying to cancel Jimmy Kimmel and things like that. Like, I think the tide is turning back. A backlash against the backlash. So, like, I hope I'm right, you know, like, I may not be right, but I just feel like right now, like, they showed how weak they are when they tried to cancel somebody for making jokes about them. And I think they overplayed their hand, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I just would pick up on a few things. One is, I agree. I mean, people asked me, after the election and on Inauguration Day, you're not going to be able to make any inroads now. The people have spoken. And what I basically told people is I think people voted for an abstraction, a sort of vague abstraction, and the key for us was, in addition to humanizing, but just the start is to document what's going on the ground, which artists can do, obviously better than the lawyers can. People need to see what it looks like in practice to say, well, we want mass deportations, what it looks like to see a mother and her children being pulled out. The other, I mean, and I agree with you, now it's going to take real courage. I mean, I'm getting threats, people, small NGOs getting threats. But I did want to sort of pick up on one point you made about artists see it first, for sure. And so I think the role of a good social justice lawyer is to know when to move it from that to the courts. And you move it too quickly, the courts are not ready for it. Maybe you say, well, so what? We needed to do it for symbolic reasons. But other people say, well, no, don't do it then, because then we have a legal precedent that lasts for the next century. And so that's really, I think, for us, what we grapple with all the time is when artists and other people call out injustice and see it way before other people, when do we move it then to the courts? And so that's what we grapple with all the time.
Yeah, and I guess I think this is why like history's so useful. Last week I was at Howard on a Gordon Parks panel, and a couple of weeks ago I was in his archives in upstate New York in Pleasantville, and this idea, we have two really important movements that show us the relationship between social justice and artistic imagination. We have the civil rights movement, right? So the music, the freedom songs, and Lee Rayford is here, and she writes beautifully about the SNCC photographs, but also like how the freedom songs are both, I think artists are also recruiters to movements, right? So if you think about what the purpose of those songs was both to speak truth to power, but to actually invite people into the movement. So we have one model of how art and social justice are fully integrated. And I bring up Gordon Parks because I'm thinking, of the Brown v. Board and the ways in which photographs are so important as evidence to push legislative action. And then I think the moment we're in, I think we're just seeing what it looks like for a culture battle to be played on the highest stage, right? So you have demands for photographs, whether this is true or not, but the idea that the famous image of the enslaved man Gordon, whose back is whipped, right? Whether that should be, the whip mark should be removed, not the photograph, but the whip mark should be removed. And I'm thinking here of Carrie Mae Weems's wonderful work in which she engages that as history. So what does it mean that we're in a moment when the whip marks, not the body, the black body is subjugated is okay.
Right.
The black bodies as the whips that show the violence of white supremacy is not okay. And so this is the moment I think we're in. And so for me, I think the civil rights movement is an important model. And I also think the black arts movement is a very important model, right? Because they were like Nixon. They were trying to figure out like a lot of stuff. They were trying to figure out, the Black Panther Party is having health clinics, and then the black arts movement is trying to think about what's the role of like free verse poetry to liberate black people. So I think we have a lot of historical models to help us, and then we're also in a very completely new moment with social media.
Right.
And we're beneficiaries of these movements, and yet we're also articulators of new demands and new desires. And so I don't know what's gonna happen. Like you have Jimmy Kimmel, which was great, the rallying around him, but then you have all these other ways in which national parks are being forced to like get rid of things. And so I think we're just in a battle. And each step forward is also marked by a very compelling and harmful desire to go back to a time that never really existed, but that people would like to tell everyone is true. So I think we're just trying to like figure out, and I think the artists are gonna be on the front lines as they already are. A lot will be sacrificed. A lot of people will be sacrificed, and yet we still have to hold the line. And so I think we're all trying to figure out what that means with our platforms. And I want to say one last thing about young people, because I think this panel is partly, and we were talking about this because you asked me how things are going at Rutgers. So Rutgers, Newark in particular, had the longest student encampment So the role of the student activists moving forward is going to look very different than it did 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think that's one of my kind of biggest concerns. Like, young people have historically organized in all of these social movements on college campuses. And now we have really strict policies in place to limit the imagination and limit the activism that young people. So can you imagine movements without young students organizing? Yeah. And so that's something I think we have to continue to pay attention to and really kind of rally around them as they are figuring out what their political voice is, the way that we were all able to become political activists.
And we need our universities to stand up for our young people and to stand up for artistic freedom.
We do.
Like, you cannot sell these kids out. Like, stop. And I think one of the things that we as artists did was organize with Jane Fonda to stand up for the First Amendment. And we need the universities to come together and fight together so that they're not singled out, but they join together in a consortium or whatever it can be to say, we're not going to allow academic freedom to be compromised by this government. We're not going to allow free speech to be stamped upon by this government. We are not going to allow it. And if we join together, then it protects everybody. We have to do it together, though. The law firms have to do it. The universities have to do it. All of them have to do it. They have to come together. And it's doable. We absolutely can do it. But it's not going to work if each organization individually is going to have to be the one standing up for themselves. We need to come together.
Right, coalition build. Thank you. So I think we have time for one more brief question. I wanted to ask you guys about sort of hope as we talk about this, right? So I know that each of you is engaged in work that holds great political significance, right? Shahidi, with your work in the voting rights sphere, and also with your production company's powerful film project highlighting disenfranchised voices. Mr. Legend, with your work at Human Level, connecting local political leaders and community organizers. Dr. Tillet, with your work and your sister's work on reshaping U.S. monuments. And Mr. Gelernt, with your work as leading attorney and deputy director for the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. So I just wanted to ask you guys, drawing from those experiences, could you share more about when there are sort of outcomes that you were expecting that didn't happen right away? How do we be hopeful to keep pushing for that change? And then we'll wrap and be done. Anybody have anything else?
We need hope. Hope is essential for the work that we do. Hope is part of what it means to be an artist, because you're, like Salamishah said, you're envisioning a better future. You're envisioning a more loving future, a more connected future. You're imagining, you're creating worlds. And so I think hope is essential to that, but it's also essential to activism, because you have to believe that what you're doing could actually work. Right. You have to believe that, like, you're gonna actually see progress due to the work you're doing. And so I think hope has to be like core to any kind of work you do where you want to change the world, because you have to believe that it could possibly actually happen. Yeah. And I think for us, we get a lot of fuel from the wins that we do experience. And you have to be like, you have to pay attention to the wins, celebrate the wins, and hold on to them, because you're going to lose sometimes. And if you allow those losses and those setbacks, that backlash, all the things we've been talking about, if you let them poison your mind into thinking that it's not worth working, then you won't do the work. Right. So we need hope. It's essential to everything we do. I think Mariam Kaba says it's a strategy. Hope is a strategy. And like, we have to do it.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say one of the ways that I really see hope is with public art, and Paula Farber was on the last panel with Monument Lab, and we're collaborating with the Long Monument Lab in the city of Chicago to create a monument to Rekia Boyd. So in next month, and Amanda Williams here is an advisor for it, we are going to see 5 artists present proposals for a monument for Rekia Boyd and 2 Black girls. and she died or was killed in a park by an off-duty police officer, Dante Servin, who lives across the street from the park. And he keeps on coming up to the artist and trying to talk to him. So there's something really intense and horrible about that, and also something really beautiful and radical to create a monument to this woman whose life was taken so tragically, and to Black girlhoods, and to celebrate that. So there's that. And then also, I'm a parent of 2 young children, Sydney, who's 10 as of last week, and Seneca, who is 13, and their sense of time is so different than mine because they were born in the age of Obama. They saw Hillary and Donald Trump election. They experienced Biden, and then they saw us vote for, well, I guess I'm supposed to say my political views, but they saw the era of Kamala Harris, right? So their sense of time is really different than mine. I'm like bemoaning loss of affirmative action, reproductive. I have a very different sense. So when I think of the world as they articulate it, time is very collapsed, and there's been so much possibility in their short life. And so that gives me hope, because in a way, we're the doré, or the long history of progress. We're feeling like we're in this moment of decline or declension, or the nadir, the second nadir, but they are like not, you know what I mean? Their imagination is different, and so therefore the possibility of freedom is different.
It's different.
And so I try to kind of live in their world a bit. It's really hard though, because I'm not on TikTok. You know what I mean? There's a lot of times I'm off, but I think and I don't know if you all experience this. I know John has 4 young children as well. Like that, their sense of time makes me see the world differently, and that's really helpful.
I love
in the present, I think.
Yeah, particularly when we're talking about youth and vision. I love that element of it. Yara, did you have something to add?
I often, just as a history nerd, like to turn to history and realizing that we aren't alone in this moment, and that even in this nightmare, this is the manifestation of somebody's wildest imagination.
That's true.
There's many people that would have, I don't know, given their lives to be a part of this version of the fight. And, you know, I think even I have a tattoo I speak about regularly. My first tattoo is 63 for 1963. But for me, what it represented was this idea of people working towards a future they weren't guaranteed, but deemed essential. And that is part of the project I think we're all participating in now, which is, I think we do deserve to be selfish and desire a better future right now, but so much of the work is in this investment in a future and things that we may not have the ability to witness ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so that continues to inspire me because I know that they found ways out and we will as well in the space of imagination.
Absolutely.
I also continue to be inspired because I think the more that we rally around giving artists and young people tools to imagine, the more we'll find routes of things we've never even thought about.
Absolutely.
I mean, our ability to create, particularly thinking about Black and brown people under tremendous pressure, is enormously impressive. Imagine what happens every time we release just a little bit of that burden and barrier. If this is what our output has been under dire circumstances,
Absolutely.
perhaps it can only get better.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us for today's panel. And thank you all, truly, for sharing your experiences and your insights. It's been so helpful, I know, for all of us in this room. As we close out today's panel, I wanted to just let you all know that we do have a brief break. It's a 20-minute break, probably around 3:40, 3:50. We'll be coming back, and we will be coming back for a tribute to Doug Harris by Dr. Lee Rayford. Thank you all so much.